Hello, crazy transformers, and welcome to Level of Crazy YouTube channel, where we dive deep into all topics EQ, healing the divide within ourselves and with each other, and transforming that reactive crazy into proactive crazy, optimizing that emotional intelligence. And today's episode is all about EQ for family drama, how to handle the process of aging parents and keeping your sanity, aka managing the crazy. I am your host, Ala Esther Levy, emotional intelligence specialist, minister of spiritual healing, and undercover comedian. And our guest for today on Zoom is Candy Cohn, is a certified senior advisor and owner of Oasis Senior Advisors, South Florida, which provides a free service helping people find senior living communities. Originally from Philadelphia, Candy has lived in South Florida since 1985 after living in Martin County for years. Sorry about that, I misspoke. She lived in Martin County for years, moved to Delray Beach in 2008, and then to Boca Raton in 2017 and Parkland in 2023. Her background in healthcare marketing includes community relations at Martin Memorial Hospital in Stuart, Florida, writing for the Psychotherapy Finances newsletter, marketing director for Flexsite Diagnostics, and community relations at the Visiting Nursing Association of Florida. After helping her own parents move to a senior living community in 2011, Candy realized the complexities and emotional challenges involved in this transition and has dedicated herself to servicing others who needed to make these same life changes. Candy is very active in the community, including being a member of BNI, Boca Raton, Business Exchange, Palm Beach County, Partnership for Aging, PFA, and participating regularly in the South County Healthcare Advocacy Network, Palm Beach County Guardianship Association, and Florida Assisted Living Association. Candy also serves as past president of the Broward County Elderly Services Resource Network and served several years on the planning committee for the Boca Raton Walk to End Alzheimer's and Brain Bowl Charity Luncheon, which raises money for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's related nonprofits. Woo! That's a lot to say. But I say all that because she is an extraordinary individual, and I wanted everyone to know and hear all her background. Now, I will post her website below. And before we get into it, please let's go ahead and give praises to our sponsor, Florida Balance Centers and EIEQ Institute, where we help you recognize and manage your level of crazy when dealing with vertigo, dizziness, balance, and pain management conditions. Look, guys, I've had vertigo and other chronic issues, and I'm currently going through premenopause. So I understand the struggle and the crazy. So stop suffering and call us today, 954-987-7077. So now let's get into it. EQ to the rescue. Ooh-hoo. Yay. All right. So here we go, Candy. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. And thank you for that introduction. That was a lot to say.
That was a lot. But you know what? It's fine because I've had such great guests on here, and I always want to give you guys, the introduction that you deserve because, your credentials speak for themselves. And even though I know you for many years, I don't always know what you're up to, and when you read something like that, it's like, oh, wow, like that's a lot to do. And she's really busy. And that's why I can't ever talk to her because she's so busy. So thank you for being here and giving us your time. We're gonna make the most out of our half hour that we have here. So let's get into it. We know each other, like I said, from various circles, but one of the most important conversations that we've ever had is when I am myself now dealing with elderly parents and the whole transition and the struggle that goes on and the family dynamics. So that is something I really want to talk about today, because I think a lot of people really need to hear this conversation. And they might be surprised about the spin that I'm going to put on this conversation. And so I'm excited that it's the two of us and we're going to really go deep. So the first question I have for you is, what happened in your life that got you into your work?
So about 13 years ago, my parents needed to move to assisted living. And the reason was my dad had bipolar depression, and he had been fine mostly. He was treated throughout the years, but every 8 or 9 years, he would have an episode. And my parents were living together at Kings Point in Delray Beach in their late 80s. My dad was still driving. My mother was not. So my mom was dependent on him for a lot of things. And he went into one of the worst episode I had really seen with him. Usually he would either be depressed or manic. This time he was both. So he was like cycling, and every day was just a nightmare. And a few years before that, I had met a woman who helped people apply for long-term care Medicaid. And that was the first time I ever learned about about long-term care Medicaid. And that's funding that will help pay for the care in assisted living. And when she told me about that, I was thrilled because my parents had, limited income. They were living off Social Security. And I knew there might come a time when they would need to either move to assisted living or have care in the home. So I had kept this woman's number, and I said, I don't need your help right now, but I might and probably will call you in a few years sometime. So fast forward 3 years, I called her and I said, I told her what was happening with my dad. And I said, this might be the time that we should look into assisted living, because I think it's too much for them to be alone. And I called my brothers who are up north, and they were totally on board. They, of course, were thrilled that this kind of money could be available. And then this consultant also told me, she asked if my dad was a veteran. She said, and he was. So she said, good, because there's money that's available through the VA as well for people who qualify financially and medically. So I called her up and I said, I kept your number. I told her what was happening with my parents. Help, what do I do? So she said, the first thing you need to do is find the assisted living, and I'm going to refer you to my friend. He's a senior living advisor, and he'll help you find the place. And then I'll apply for Medicaid, and I'll refer you to another client who will apply for the VA benefits, and will help you through this. And I was like, wow, this is great. Thank you. So we ended up having to get my dad into the hospital, actually, which was a whole ordeal in itself, because I had to get him into the psych unit. And when we brought him there, of course, he was kicking and screaming. It was a nightmare. And when he was sitting in the lobby, we were sitting in the waiting room at the ER, he started having chest pain. And now my dad had this condition where he would get these pains and it was nothing. He had it my whole life. It would last maybe a minute. But of course they had to then put him into the cardiac unit at the hospital, and he was there for a couple days doing tests. And then they said, oh, he's fine, and we're going to send him home. And I said, no, I brought him here to get him into the psych unit. So I had to really advocate for him and really push. And I did manage. I was successful. We got him into the psych unit, got him stabilized. And in the meantime, while he was in the hospital, my mother and I went out with this senior living advisor who helped us find a senior living community for them. And at the end of it all, I asked him, I was so grateful, and I had been in healthcare marketing, as you mentioned, and I asked him if he needed help with his marketing, because I was doing some freelance marketing at the time. And he said, I'm actually looking to train someone to do senior placement with me. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, I think I would love doing this. And that's how I got started. And then 7 years ago, I bought a franchise. So I now own the South Florida territory of Oasis Senior Advisors. And I love what I do. I truly feel like I have found my life's calling.
Nice. Okay, that's amazing. So
Yeah.
now tell me, let's get really into the meat and potatoes of this conversation, which is where the family dynamics go bonkers.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I'm going to quote a couple times here is, I don't know if you've ever seen the show 6 Feet Under.
No.
No, okay. So it's about a family that is they are in the funeral business, and the dad dies, and the brothers now have to work together to run this business. And the mom is getting older, so she can't really help, but she stays, she's a housewife, so she cleans, and then she's like does her thing, and she tries to find ways to stay busy. And then there's a younger sister who's only in high school, so she can't really do a lot. So she does here and there, jobs like that. But what
Mhm.
happens is that the two brothers now have to figure out a way to now work together, because the one brother had stayed with the family and had always been a part of what happens in life with the family and in the business. And the other brother was always away, and would come and go and never really wanted any part of the family business. So
Mm.
now the brother shows up, and right as he shows up, or actually he has to show up because the father dies.
Mhm.
And so now, the other brother has to show up. So the reason I bring up this show is because it really showed me from an outside perspective, because it's hard to sometimes see ourselves, right? And
Mhm.
our own level of crazy. It's hard to see how we are behaving. And I learned from watching things from the outside, and I'm sure many people do, and that's why we say that we are all reflections for one another,
Mhm.
is how these dynamics happen. I know that we've had extensive conversations about you and your family and the kind of stuff that went on in your family. So maybe you can touch on that just a little bit briefly, and then we can continue from there.
Sure. So with my family, my brothers were very appreciative that, I had found these consultants and was getting things moving along. We all agreed, yes, let's move mom and dad to senior living. The money situation was going to work out because of the Medicaid and VA money, thank goodness. So that wasn't any issue. Um, it was later after my dad, after I moved my parents, we moved our parents to the senior assisted living where we moved them. Unfortunately, about 6 months later, my dad stopped being able to swallow. And we took him to the hospital, and they pretty much said they think he had a series of mini strokes, which is what caused this, and he was going to need a feeding tube. And, sometimes there's a debate whether or not you should get a feeding tube, but he was vibrant. He wasn't depressed anymore. The depression, we totally got that under control. So it wasn't really a question. He was not anywhere near his end of life. So yeah, we had to have him get the feeding tube. And then it hit me, I bet he won't be able to go back to the assisted living where they were. So I called the guy that helped us find it, the consultant, and I asked him, and he said, no, he's not going to be able to go back there. So there are certain assisted livings that can handle a feeding tube, but there weren't any, and back then there weren't as many as there are now, and they wouldn't have necessarily taken Medicaid, and all of those issues would have been a problem too. So the thing that seemed to make the most sense was to put him in a skilled nursing facility. So that's what we did. And that's when as my dad started to deteriorate, my brothers who are up north started to really want to take over and control things. Whereas here I was the one here, and I had gotten now into the industry. So I was meeting all kinds of people who were very knowledgeable. I met people who worked for hospice. I met people with home health companies, and I was learning so much. And, my brothers every night would kind of call me, and I felt like they were interrogating me. Here I was exhausted. I went to see my dad every day. I had just started this new career. I was trying to be supportive to my mom. And they would call me every night and like ask me, like, you know, I felt like they were firing at me. You got to do this, 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 and this. And tomorrow you got to do this. And, you know, and what was dad's this level, that level? And, you know, they're both very much into all those kind of numbers and all that. Whereas I was into what was happening to my dad. He was deteriorating. It was sad. I came to give him love and to talk to him and all of that. And they wanted to save him and make him live forever. Whereas I was trying to make him comfortable and make this process just as comfortable as it could be for him. And that was when, you know, things started getting really tense between my brothers and me. And at that point, I really wanted to put our dad on palliative care, and they didn't want to hear anything, any parts of that. So that was where the conflict really started to get bigger and bigger. And I mean, I had pretty much asked the skilled nursing facility to put him on palliative care. And when my brothers found out, they were furious. Now, granted, I didn't really discuss it with them because I didn't feel like I could. And they just were livid. And we ended up having a big, long conversation one night, both brothers, and I felt like I was being attacked. I was crying hysterically by the end of this like hour-long phone call, which I don't know why I stayed on. I shouldn't have stayed on that call. So it just got worse and worse and worse. And by the time our father passed away, well, when we knew he was really at the end, then they did allow hospice to come in, my brothers, for just 48 hours, which was ridiculous. We could have benefited from so many services for many months that we didn't. And at that point, my brother came in when he knew my dad was dying, and we weren't talking, and it was a horrible scene at the skilled nursing facility. My brother was yelling at my mother. He didn't even acknowledge me, and the funeral was awful. You know, on the surface, nobody would have known, but it was bad. And then my brother, the one brother was the one that I really wasn't getting along with at that point, and we stopped talking to each other for a year. So it was bad. It was a really
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I really want to cover, because we have such a short time together and because it's such an important conversation, I'm going to get straight to it. Here's what I see happening in terms of from an EQ perspective, right? And this is a call. I mean, this interaction is about helping people really have some tools to focus on what can we do to avoid these situations with family. And here's what I see, guys. Here's what happens most of the time. And you tell me if you agree or not, Candy. What I see more and more every day is that people just go into control issues. It's like they just want control. It's about ego. It's about feeling like significant. It's about, you know, like feeling, you know, I'm the best son or I'm the best daughter, or look at me, I'm like this hero now and I know what's best for everybody. And it's just like it goes through this crazy egotistical controlling cycle, right?
Yeah.
And okay, good. So it's not just me thinking that, or actually, you know, yeah, I see it time and time again, and it even happens in my family. And so you know, here's what I believe is really the right tools that we need to use. And maybe you can share some tools, Candy, about what you feel would have been better. Like if you had a magic wand, I'll let you go first. If you had a magic wand and you could have created the perfect scenario, and so maybe those of you listening out there can follow this, you can avoid these things too. What would you have loved to happen?
Well, I can tell you what I did to preemptively to avoid this scenario when my mother was getting ill. Before she got ill is what I did. That's how preemptive I was. So my mom was fine. You know, my dad was the one that needed assistance. So after the year of my brother and I not talking, first of all, I realized, and he came and visited and stayed with me, and we like stayed up all night talking one night. You know, we agreed we wanted to make up somehow. And I said to him, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I realized we had two different goals. My goal was to see dad peacefully pass. sooner rather than later. It was awful what he was living, how he was living. And my brother wanted to save him forever. And, my brother wasn't here. He felt guilty. He didn't see my parents. My parents and I we moved to Florida from Philadelphia. My other brothers weren't here. My brothers weren't here. So there was guilt. There was all of that. So that was one thing. We had two different goals. So I think you need to realize and understand what is each person's goal in the family. And then what I did was I knew that I was not able to explain to my brothers the benefits of hospice and palliative care when we were in the throes of it. So I had become friendly with a palliative care physician through all of my organizations that I was involved with. And I asked this man if he would meet with my brothers when they came down to visit. So I managed to schedule it with one of my brothers when he came. And it was amazing. They listen to other people better than they listen to family. And this man was a doctor. He was, not just in the field of senior care, but he was a physician dealing with this every day. So he sat down with us for like an hour and explained, what does the DNR, do not resuscitate me, form mean? Because that became an issue. Even with my mother at that point, my brother had come to visit and he saw that there was a do not resuscitate form hanging on her door at the assisted living, because that's where you had to put it. And he's like, they're not going to take care of my mother because I'm like, no, that's not what it means. So this doctor explained to him, it just means if her heart stops working, they're not going to resuscitate her. Because if they do, they're going to pound on her chest and your little tiny 78-pound mother is going to crumble. Do you want her then to live with the repercussions of that? So he was able to explain that, of course, in a different way than I just did. And he said, I have a DNR, this doctor. He's like, everyone should have a DNR. It's not like what it looks like on TV where they pound and save you. And he said, it's horrible. So that was the first step. And then he explained what is palliative care, what is hospice. So when our mother started to become ill, we put her on hospice and there was no debate. And that was, so I think education is so important, and to try to do it before. That's why, like, I try to educate people about senior living before they need it, because when you don't want people to make a decision in a crisis. That's the worst time, because bad decisions are made in crisis, when there's a crisis.
That's great. So everything you say is so great. And I'm going to reiterate it because these are the exact tools, EQ tools, that we each need to do to prevent these mashugana moments that happen, right, in our lives, because so many families are being destroyed over this same conversation. And it's so upsetting. So guys, this is what we do. Number one, talk to each other, right? Align your goals, have that conversation, right? Like, okay, this is what I want. This is what you want. Where can we meet common ground? Okay.
And I just want to interject here. The
Yeah.
important thing is, what does mom want? What does dad want? We didn't have that spelled out enough, I don't think. And that, they should do that. There's a form that hospice puts out called 5 Wishes. And it doesn't have to be formal, but you do have to have these difficult conversations before someone gets sick.
Yes, I actually had that written down, like create a pre-plan, a pre-crisis plan. This is something that I just learned about at the Chamber of Commerce. We talked about hurricane preparation, right? And same way that we would make a plan for a hurricane or, fire drills in school, they have a pre-plan and they practice over and over again. Now, let's be real. Most families probably will not do this. Most families will probably wait until a crisis, right? And then they will go in and they will try to deal with it. So, but one of the tools here, guys, is try to pre-plan, okay? Try to have a plan of, hey, mom, dad, what would you like? Do you want to be buried? Do you want a cremation? Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want to be resuscitated? Create a living will, create the power of attorneys, do all that stuff ahead of time, even though those conversations they're hard to have, but the reality is we're all going to go, you know what I mean? Number two, and I'm kind of juggling around the tools here, but at the end of the day, they're all the same, regardless of order, is being humble, really understanding that we each in the family, and this is something that's vital. This is where the ego and the control comes in. Each one of us has our own role and strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And each one of us, right, has to recognize that. Each one of us has to be humble enough to say, you know what, you're better at that. Why don't you take that on? Like what you did with your mom this time, the second time around, you said, okay, you know what? I'm going to organize the phone call. I'll get the meeting set up and we can have this conversation. And then they feel like everybody was contributing. Everybody felt like a part of it. Everybody feels like a winner. Everybody feels like, okay, I had something to do with this, and now I can feel good about this when mom or dad goes, right?
Yes.
So having that is so important, and really checking our egos and checking our level of crazy, because this is where it's really, really important. Then you had mentioned the education, 100%, really everybody understanding that there are parts here that we are learning by doing. Nobody knows anything better than anybody unless you're in this all the time. So learning by doing and really just supporting each other. And again, going back to the humbleness of that, I don't know everything. I don't know what I don't know. So let me step back, and maybe my sister knows, or maybe my brother knows, and we can all learn together. Or none of us know, but maybe we can find the resources and assign the different roles to whoever wants to take that on, so that you can all communicate and make it happen. Right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and then going back to the aligning of the goals, I think that is so vital, and 100% about what you said about, checking in with the family. What do they want? What do mom and dad want? Now, a lot of times mom and dad may not know what they want.
Right.
And maybe a crisis happened and you didn't get a chance to ask mom and dad what they wanted, or whoever the person is that's suffering here. But that is the opportunity to have those conversations. And again, going back again to the ego part of us, right? And saying, okay, let's sit down. Let's all have a conversation. Let's not have egos here. Let's not have all these control issues. And let's really think about what is the best thing for the situation, and how can we find solutions instead of constantly battling each other. So, I think those tools right there, Candy, I think that is exactly the kind of stuff that I really wanted to talk about on this call today, because people really need to understand that the world already is in such a disarray because of these same dynamics. No matter where we look, in whatever genre we look today, whether it's politics or healthcare or mental health or sports teams or business, it is the same thing, going back to always the same thing. We lack humbleness. We want to be egocentric about things. We want control. And where does it really get us?
Yeah. No, I think that's all of that. And the humble, I love that. That's, I was listening to a podcast the other day about leadership, and being humble was one of the things they really emphasized. Yeah.
My favorite song, Candy, and I included this in my book, my everlasting book that's taking forever to finally be manifest, but not because of me, but because I'm working with a publisher. God bless them. My favorite song is Humble and Kind by Tim McGraw. Have you ever heard that song?
No, I'll have to look for it.
It's an amazing song. It's beautiful. And it says, humble and kind. And it's a lovely song that really speaks to this, that at the end of the day, if we truly want to make a change in our world on any level, we have to practice this humble and kind. And for a long time, my mantra was humble be confident but humble. Be confident but humble. And so, as we wrap up, I know we didn't get to a lot of the questions, but the bottom line, we covered it, because this is it right here. This is, how do we solve these human problems? How do we solve these issues with these family dynamics? And guys, we just gave it to you. We just gave it to you. Be humble, right? Be kind. Try to focus on what we talked about with the goals, the education, that, keeping everybody involved, assigning your roles. Everybody has a strength. Use each other effectively. Because how about you, Candy? Like, I really truly feel like spiritually, there's spiritual reasons for why we're here on earth. And so each one of us comes here to do certain things. And that also involves our family members, right?
Right, absolutely. And I just want to also mention that, I often refer clients to a mental health therapist or a mediator, that those professionals can be very, very helpful.
Yeah. And I know that Candy has helped us tremendously with our family. She's been a mediator for us. And, it wasn't, she did her part. It was more of, my family needs to still work on certain things. But I will tell you that these are the things that we got to work on, guys. If you work on these tools that we talked about on this phone call and on this interview, I truly feel that you will see some big turnarounds. And Candy, you're proof in the pudding, because you said it. The second time around, it worked.
Right. Yes, and my brothers and I are very close again, and we did the right thing with our mom, and we felt good about that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, any last thoughts, Candy, about, anything else that people can do, any resources that they can reach out? I'm going to put your website in the comments. Anything you want to leave us with?
I just want to mention that my services are free, and I'm happy to be a resource just to talk. I get calls, I do a lot of counseling myself. And also the area agency on aging, in every community, there's one. That's a really good resource. In Florida, South Florida, 211 is another good resource. So there's, there are places. AARP has lots of good information. So I just suggest either reaching out to one of the, go on the websites, call me, call whoever you need to call, but get some, don't go it alone. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Candy. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for being an example for us, and for showing that if we do it the right way, and if we stay humble and kind, that you will have these results. So thank you so much for everything. We're going to go ahead and oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. Let me go ahead and close up. Don't go anywhere. And thank you again, Candy, for everything. And as always, guys, thank you for being here. What a great conversation we've had. And just a reminder, if you would like to support our work, there is a donation link below in the comments. Until we see you again next time, let's close up with the quote. And Candy, you might know my quote, so feel free to share. So here we go. When you know and understand yourself, the world will know and understand you too. And remember, what's the best that can happen? And now let's get crazy. Okay, guys, take care. Till next time. Bye.
Bye.